Do you really know who Disney's true girl next door was? She was once the brightest face of Disney in the 1960s, the golden girl of Pollyanna and The Parent Trap, who stepped into Hollywood with a luminous smile and a future that seemed destined to shine. But as she grew older, her life veered in a direction no one expected. She lost nearly all the money she had earned throughout her childhood, entered a marriage controlled by a man 33 years her senior, and later found herself in a series of emotionally demanding relationships. Behind Disney's wholesome girl-next-door image was Hayley Mills, and the real story of soaring fame and of the pain and quiet tragedies that gnawed at her spirit for decades. Hayley Catherine Rose. Vivian Mills was born on April 18, 1946, in London, into an artistic family often regarded as the aristocracy of the British stage. Her father, Sir John Mills, the star of Great Expectations and Ryan's Daughter. Her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, a playwright and novelist. And her sister Juliet Mills was also an actress. In that environment, Hayley grew up surrounded by scripts, stage lights, and the discipline of the craft, not the pampering usually associated with a celebrity child. Her childhood moved between two contrasting worlds. On one side was the warm, lively family farm, where Hayley ran around freely, watched her parents create art, and developed an early instinct for acting. On the other was boarding school, a cold, restrictive life that made her, a sensitive girl, feel more controlled than encouraged. In her memoir, Forever Young, she recalls a moment of early awakening. A priest at the boarding school attempted to sexually exploit her in exchange for a role in the school play. It was enough for a 13-year-old to understand that not everyone was as kind as they appeared. Thus, behind the image of the perfect Disney child, Hayley was a young girl filled with insecurities, anxieties, and countless moments of retreating into her private world of books. She adored Anya Seton's Catherine, a romantic historical novel she read to feel a sense of freedom amid the dreary life at boarding school. And it was during those teenage years that Hayley began to experience her first stirrings of affection. She once lightly dated George Harrison of the Beatles, a small, little-known detail that offers a different glimpse into a girl the public assumed was completely innocent. Those contradictions, an artistic household, a strict boarding school, her first lesson in personal boundaries and early teenage feelings laid the foundation for a Hayley Mills who was both fragile and resilient. Hayley entered cinema almost by accident. At just 12 years old, she appeared in Tiger Bay, 1959, a British independent film she thought of simply as playing with Dad, with no idea that it would change the course of her life. That first performance was both innocent and instinctive. A boarding school girl, mischievous and self-conscious about her oversized teeth, suddenly standing before a camera with a natural emotional sensitivity that stunned critics. But the true turning point came from a man half a world away. A print of Tiger Bay happened to land in the hands of Walt Disney, precisely when he was searching for a young face for his upcoming project, Pollyanna. He watched the film in his private screening room, stopped halfway, and told the casting team only one sentence: "Find me that girl." The amusing part is that Hayley didn't initially understand how big Disney really was. In her memoir, she recalls that at the time, she had no sense of Disney as a global institution, nor did she grasp that the man who created Mickey Mouse was a giant in American culture. To a 12-year-old girl, Walt Disney was simply a sweet old man with a thin mustache, nothing like a Hollywood mogul. Not long after, Hayley was invited to meet Disney in his hotel suite in London. The meeting was full of unforgettable details. She arrived with her parents, her brother, and a Pekingese dog gifted by Vivian Lee and Laurence Olivier, a dog that kept peeing on the carpet, mortifying the entire family. While everyone panicked, Walt Disney calmly observed and smiled, as if he already knew he had found the person he wanted. She later said it was the most wonderful audition of her life, not because of any Hollywood grandeur, but because of the simplicity and warmth Walt created for her family. Before signing the contract, Walt Disney even wrote a handwritten letter to her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, thanking her for giving the world such a rare talent. The Mills family kept that letter for decades, a small testimony to a destined encounter. At the end of the London meeting, Disney offered her an exclusive 7-picture deal, turning a girl raised between a Sussex farm and a bleak boarding school into Disney's daughter. And Pollyanna, 1960, was the explosion. The film, a remake of the story once tied to Mary Pickford, unexpectedly became a global sensation and transformed Hayley, a shy 14-year-old boarding school girl, into the most beloved face in America. Walt Disney appeared on set more often than on any other project, gently wandering around, checking in on every crew member, and always standing behind the camera watching Hayley with a particular protectiveness. He wanted her to feel he was there, but he never once pressured her, a warmth almost paternal, which Hayley carried with her for the rest of her life. Within that atmosphere, the role of Pollyanna exploded far beyond anyone's imagination. Hayley won the Academy Juvenile Award and the Golden Globe, becoming one of the youngest performers ever honored at the Oscars. The press was swept into the Hayley Mills phenomenon. Hedda Hopper wrote that Walt had once called her the finest talent to come into films in 25 years. Behind the scenes, however, the girl herself was painfully shy. Even the song, America, Spread Your Golden Wings, one of the most beautiful moments in the film, she didn't want to record because she was too embarrassed. Disney had to encourage her repeatedly and adjust the environment so she could feel as natural as possible in front of the camera. When the movie premiered and turned into a massive hit, Hayley's fame rose so sharply that Disney received over 7,000 fan letters a week. Some sent diamond rings. One person even offered her an otter to keep in her bathtub. And yet, every time she returned to England, Hayley was still required to finish the strict school meals at her boarding school. No one treated her like a star. That contrast made the success of Pollyanna even more surreal and haunting. A girl celebrated by America but living between two clashing worlds. The optimism and clear-eyed innocence of Pollyanna made Hayley the spiritual child of America at the time. And it marked the moment she stepped directly into the ranks of A-list stars before she had even turned 15. A year later, Disney challenged her again with a role considered technically daring at the time, The Parent Trap, 1961. Hayley played both twins, Susan and Sharon, with opposing personalities, appearing in the same frame, talking, arguing, and eventually reuniting. The twin-shot scenes required near mathematical precision, yet Hayley performed them so naturally that audiences forgot there was only one girl standing in front of the camera. The film was not only a major success, but also became one of Disney's 3 highest-grossing family movies of the decade, elevating Hayley from a Disney star into a global icon of children's cinema. Even the song Let's Get Together, just a cheerful tune she performed in the film, unexpectedly reached the Billboard Top 10, a rare feat for a child actress who wasn't pursuing a singing career. The Parent Trap confirmed what Hollywood had to acknowledge. Hayley Mills wasn't just the face of Disney. She was someone who could carry an entire major film at an age when most children were still struggling with homework. When Hayley signed her 7-picture contract, Disney knew they had a diamond in their hands. and they polished that diamond with every project. They tossed her into the open sea in Search of the Castaways, 1962, to see how she handled action and emotion. They let her explore a more mature tone with Summer Magic, 1963. Then they brought her back to her mischievous instincts in That Darn Cat, 1965. 3 films, 3 experiments, and Hayley aced them all, becoming Disney's golden girl without question. But childhood cannot last forever. Hayley began to grow up. Her body changed. Her emotions shifted. But the audience did not. They only wanted to see the perfect little girl Disney had created, an unchanging emblem of innocence. The older she became, the more trapped she felt in that mold. On screen, she still had to smile sweetly and play childlike roles. Off screen, she was already a young woman filled with confusion, quiet desires, and the lingering question of who she really was. It was a silent tug-of-war between the image the world adored and the person trying to exist beneath it. And it unfolded so quietly that most viewers never noticed. And it was precisely while she was wrestling with herself that Hayley Mills's career blazed its brightest. Her peak didn't arrive in a single dazzling moment that faded quickly. It was a sweeping arc, beginning with the glow of Disney and stretching into adulthood. From 1960 to 1965, Hayley was not just Hollywood's child star. She was the heartbeat of an entire era, the face Disney used to define family films throughout the 1960s. These were the years when a 14, 18-year-old girl became a global phenomenon, receiving thousands of fan letters every week, starring in hit after hit, and turning into a true cultural icon. But at that very peak, Hayley did something few child stars have the courage to do. She chose to grow up, even when Hollywood wasn't ready to see it. After her golden run with Disney, The Family Way, 1966, became the milestone that marked Hayley's break from her childhood image. She was no longer the clear-eyed Pollyanna or the mischievous twins of The Parent Trap. For the first time, Hayley stepped into an adult story with emotions that were real, fragile, and even daring. The film shocked the public, stirred controversy in the press. But critics saw something unmistakable. The girl the world once adored had become a true actress. From that point on, Hayley's career was no longer loud, but steady, enduring, and respected. She moved through television, independent films, and stage productions with the same meticulous professionalism colleagues often praised: punctual, disciplined, never showy, never demanding. Anyone who worked with her said the same thing. She grew up under the stage lights, and she never betrayed them. That peak found its perfect closure in the year 2000, when Disney awarded Hayley the Disney Legends Award, recognizing her contributions to the studio's golden age. It was a beautifully closed circle. From the little girl Walt Disney singled out with "Find Me That Girl," to the woman who became a legend within the very universe she created. Hayley never disappeared from Hollywood. She simply changed the way she stood in the light. No longer the child star who made history, but a mature artist, calm and strong, who proved that fame may come early, but a real career takes a lifetime to shape. Like many great stars, the spotlight was only one part of Hayley Mills's life. The other part, more complicated, emotional, and controversial, began the moment she fell in love. In 1966, when she stepped onto the set of The Family Way at age 20, Hayley was still the Disney princess in the public eye. The clear-eyed Pollyanna, the mischievous Sharon, Susan of The Parent Trap, and the embodiment of innocence that audiences were never prepared to let go of. But behind that image was a young woman fumbling toward adulthood, and it was in that space that Roy Bolting appeared. Roy was 53 then, 33 years older than Hayley, and a true titan of British cinema. One half of the Bolting brothers, the men behind Brighton Rock, 1947, Private's Progress, I'm All Right Jack with Peter Sellers, and later, The Last Word, 1979. He had lived through war, fame, 3 marriages, and many complicated romances. A long, turbulent life that made the British press both respect him and tread carefully around him. When he died at 87 in Oxfordshire, newspapers still used the same familiar phrase, a brilliant but controversial filmmaker. And one of those controversies began in 1966. When news of Roy Bolting's affair with Hayley Mills spread across Britain. It was a genuine cultural shock. To the public, the 33-year age gap was more than a number. It tore apart the image they had protected for Hayley for nearly a decade. Many felt as if their own childhood had been stolen. That Pollyanna, the symbol of innocence for an entire generation, had fallen into the arms of a man old enough to be her father, or even her grandfather. Newspapers called it an unequal romance, questioning the fragile line between power, experience, and the innocence of a young woman just entering her 20s. Editorial columns lamented that Hayley was losing the purity audiences cherished. Some fans even sent protest letters to Disney, saying they felt betrayed. But there was another current of opinion, smaller but unwavering, that stood with Hayley. They believed she had grown up, that the private life of a 20-year-old woman could not be dictated by a Hollywood-made image. To them, the bond between Hayley and Roy was not a scandal, but the meeting of 2 artistic souls at the right moment. And in Hayley's private world, things were even simpler. She loved Roy for his intelligence, his sensitivity, and the feeling of being understood. Something childhood fame had never given her. Roy himself spoke about their relationship in a 1998 interview. He said they met on a level deeper than personality, that he felt vulnerable around Hayley, and that age was never a barrier to love. It was precisely that age difference that made Roy hesitant to marry at first, but when Hayley told him she wanted children, he understood the relationship had gone farther than he had expected. After 5 years of living together, they married, and Hayley became his 4th wife out of 5. Hayley Mills and Roy Bolting's wedding unfolded far more quietly than the noise it created in the press. When they announced their marriage, the British media nearly lost its mind. From serious newspapers to tabloid sheets, every outlet placed 2 contrasting images side by side. The Disney princess, with Pollyanna's bright, innocent eyes, and the director nearly old enough to be her father, a figure of the older generation, worldly, sharp, sometimes bitter toward life. When the Los Angeles Times later wrote about Roy Bolting, it noted that his marriage to Hayley had been described as a story that made the public both curious and uneasy. People called their wedding a cultural shock, not because of love itself, but because it felt as though all of Britain was witnessing a girl they'd watched grow up suddenly step into the life of a much older, world-worn man far too quickly. But for Hayley, it was neither rebellion nor an escape from her Disney image. It was one of the rare moments in her life when she could make a major decision entirely on her own, choosing the man she believed she loved, despite all the outside judgment. In one of the few surviving wedding photos, Hayley smiles softly, while Roy holds her hand tightly, as if they both understood the road ahead would be anything but peaceful. It wasn't just the grip of an older man protecting his young wife, but also a quiet acknowledgement that they were stepping into a marriage watched by an entire nation with a mix of skepticism and fascination. And then, once the door of marriage closed behind them, an entirely different world opened for Hayley. They lived like two artists hidden away in an oasis removed from the noise outside. In London, their Chelsea apartment became a gathering place for writers, painters, and intellectuals, where Hayley, for the first time, felt she was being seen as a grown woman. And when they needed distance from the chaos, they left the city and returned to Cobblestone Windmill in Buckinghamshire. The old windmill perched on a hilltop, where they kept cats, read books, wrote scripts, and welcomed artist friends who came to talk through the night. In the evenings, they sat by the fireplace, poured wine, and talked about cinema, theater, and the endless stream of ideas. In the mornings, they walked through the mist of the Chiltern Hills. Slow, unhurried steps that made Hayley feel, perhaps for the first time, that she was truly living her own life. Not inside a role, not under bright lights, but as a young woman learning to breathe at her own pace. But even within that seemingly peaceful, idyllic picture, the first cracks of their marriage quietly appeared, small enough to miss, yet unmistakably signaling that their differences would soon speak louder. The differences, once softened by the intoxication of love, now revealed themselves little by little. Roy was calm, seasoned, but also conservative in the way a man becomes after living too long inside his own comfort zone. Hayley was the opposite, young, curious, eager to explore the world, eager to challenge herself after years of being boxed into the identity of a child star. They were living on two completely different rhythms. He slowed down. She wanted to move faster. What had once drawn them to each other, their differences, now became the force pulling them apart. And by 1977, they quietly divorced. Not with the noise that accompanied their beginning, just two people stepping out of the illusion that love, no matter how intense, could bridge every distance created by time and age. But amid all the fractures, one beautiful thing bound them together forever: Crispian Mills. Crispian was born in 1973, the only child of a relationship that was both controversial and deeply emotional. In that little boy, people could clearly see two currents of blood intertwining: the artistic freedom, innocence, and strong intuition from Hayley, and the intellectual depth and contemplative nature from Roy. He grew up between two worlds, the lively Chelsea apartment and the quiet Buckinghamshire windmill, and carried all those undercurrents into the music that would later make him a phenomenon. 2 decades later, Crispian burst into prominence in the 1990s with the band Kula Shaker, choosing a path completely unlike Oasis or Blur. Psychedelic rock infused with Indian music, sitar, mantras, and Eastern spiritual color. That boldness made him one of the most distinctive voices of the Britpop era. For Hayley, Crispian's success was never tied to the fame of his parents. She always believed her son rose on his own talent and character without relying on any shadow behind him. In the way Hayley spoke about Crispian, there was always a quiet, unmistakable pride. Not flashy, not embellished, but a sincere recognition of a young man who carved his own path in music entirely through merit. After her marriage to Roy Bolting ended, Hayley entered a period she would later describe as the quiet void after an earthquake. The hurt did not close her heart. It simply made her more certain of what she needed. A partner who could walk beside her, not lead her, not control her. And then, amidst long nights performing in the West End, amidst those moments backstage when she had to steady herself and believe her career still had a future, Hayley met actor-director Lee Lawson. Lee was not a towering figure like Roy, nor was he a controversial choice that sent newspapers into chaos. He was simply someone who made Hayley feel understood. They came together naturally, quietly, like two artists finding common ground in a stage of life where fame was no longer something to chase at any cost. Lee was younger and more emotionally attuned. He saw in Hayley not the Disney ingenue, but a woman learning to free herself from the shadow the world had draped over her. And she, after years beside an older, stern, and somewhat traditional man, found in Lee a more balanced form of companionship. A love light enough not to confine her, yet deep enough to help her heal. In 1976, Hayley gave birth to her second son, Jason Lawson. It came at a time when she was struggling to rebuild her career after losing nearly all her earnings to taxes, fighting the quiet psychological wounds left from her Disney years, and trying to become the kind of mother she herself had longed for as a child. Jason arrived like a gift, a reminder that no matter where her career pulled her, real life lay right in her arms. But eventually, reality asserted itself. Both Hayley and Lee were artists, people who constantly had to move, whose lives were consumed by film contracts, touring schedules, and roles demanding more time than they could give each other. Lee became a devoted stepfather to Crispian, and Hayley valued that more than anything. But affection, however genuine, was not enough to reconcile two lives traveling in opposite directions. There were no fights, no tabloids circling, no betrayal, only a deeply human truth. Sometimes loving each other is still not enough to stay together for the long haul. By the late 1970s, they chose to part ways, a separation that left no major wounds, only a chapter. Hayley would later recall with calmness and affection. Lee continued on his own path. Hayley continued being a mother, an actress, a survivor of the spotlight. Yet her time with Lee remained a warm memory, a rare moment of peace in a life swept into fame's current since she was 14. After parting from Lee Lawson, Hayley stepped into a more mature, more grounded phase of life. She had lived through a controversial marriage, a gentle but fragile relationship, and years spent balancing her career with raising two children. She was no longer looking for grand, consuming romance, but for stability, something steady, quiet, and understanding. It was in this context that she met Feroz Abbas Khan, an Indian actor, director, and playwright. They met while working on a stage project together in the late 1990s. What caught Hayley's attention wasn't age, she was 20 years older, but his calmness, his direct way of speaking, and the respect he showed her, not as a former Disney star, but as an artist still trying to live truthfully. Their relationship unfolded naturally. No noise, no shock value like her marriage to Roy Bolting, no frantic schedules like those she had faced with Lee Lawson. Feroz entered Hayley's life at precisely the moment she needed someone who knew how to listen and how to stay without controlling. Since 1997, they have remained together, steady and enduring. They never married, never held an engagement ceremony, never sought media attention. They chose to live like two adults who understand the true value of privacy. If her past relationships had brought turbulence, Feroz brought her something she had rarely known: stability and peace. And this time, she chose the right person. In 2008, on her 62nd birthday, Hayley Mills received the call no one ever wants to hear. She had breast cancer, in both breasts. She later said her first feeling wasn't panic, but that my body felt like it paused for a beat. The woman who had grown up under studio lights, endured scandal, financial loss, and complicated love, was now facing a silent but devastating enemy. Hayley was scheduled for surgery immediately. The operation went smoothly, but it was only the beginning. Doctors told her she needed to begin the next stage, chemotherapy. a journey Hayley herself described as, "I had never felt so weak." The chemo days drained her completely. She grew exhausted, lost her hair, couldn't sleep, and suffered pain so severe she sometimes couldn't get out of bed. At moments, she felt she was dying, but she wasn't alone. Faraz stayed by her side, becoming the most important emotional anchor she had during that life-or-death chapter. And then, at a point where she could no longer bear it, Hayley made a decision that many doctors feared meant she would stop treatment. She believed she could not prolong her existence at the cost of losing all her dignity and quality of life. From that moment, she shifted to alternative treatments, partly medical, partly supportive therapies. It was a risky decision, but Hayley felt she needed to reclaim control of the battle, not be someone simply carried along by a series of clinical protocols. The remarkable thing was that even without completing the full chemotherapy regimen, she responded well to complementary treatments and long-term monitoring. By 2012, Hayley received the words she had waited for: "No sign of cancer." It was a victory without fanfare. Only Hayley, Faraz Abbas Khan, and her family truly understood that this battle had taken from her no less than any scandal, crisis, or personal loss she had faced in the past. Cancer didn't just change the way Hayley viewed her health. It made her reassess her entire life. She said her greatest regret wasn't bad choices or the wounds of her youth, but not being with her children enough during the years she was constantly filming. In a way, the cancer battle forced Hayley to pause for the first time in more than half a century. And from that point on, her life entered a new chapter, slower, more deliberate, and more conscious of every single day she was still here to live. But cancer, brutal as it was not the first time Hayley Mills had faced a blow powerful enough to threaten her entire future. In truth, life had exposed her to storms long before, when a financial tragedy quietly drained the foundation of her youth, while the world still imagined that the Disney girl was living a rosy dream. Did you know? All the income Hayley earned during her golden Disney years had been placed in a trust fund from the time she was a child. Everyone said that at age 21, it would be her ticket to freedom, the reward she deserved after working tirelessly since she was 12. But behind that fund, things had never been as intact as Hayley thought. In her childhood, her father, Sir John Mills, was the one who managed her finances. He invested her earnings into what seemed like safe ventures that turned out to be misguided. Several lost large sums, and some debts were even taken out in Hayley's name.
However, the script eventually won her over, and she agreed to
bear without ever knowing they existed. These truths she only learned as an adult, and they were difficult to swallow. But the biggest blow was still waiting for her at age 21. The day Hayley opened her trust fund, instead of receiving the fruits of her childhood labor, she was hit by a shock that drained the blood from her face. Her lawyer informed her that the UK tax office had imposed a 91% tax on the entire sum, and even advised that if she wanted to keep anything at all, her only option was to leave England. The explanation sounded reasonable. The country was rebuilding after World War II and needed revenue. But for Hayley, it was an unjust sentence delivered at the exact moment she was stepping into adulthood. When she was advised to sue her father or her lawyer for mismanagement, Hayley refused. She said her family had protected her throughout her childhood, and she could not repay them by dragging them into court. Meanwhile, another blow sent her finances into deeper chaos. Her former manager was accused of financial misconduct. Hayley had no choice but to sue, and the long legal process generated enormous legal fees, draining what little money she had left. During those years, Hayley accepted roles she wasn't proud of, simply because the paychecks kept her afloat. Her career drifted away from major projects, and every time she stood before the camera, she felt as if she were carrying the weight of a childhood hollowed out by decisions she had never been allowed to make. Then came the legal war with the government, a battle that lasted 6 years. First appeal, lost. Second appeal 3 years later, lost again. Only in 1972, when the case reached Lord Denning, did Hayley see a glimmer of hope. Denning ruled that she had paid her taxes and the fund was rightfully hers. But the victory lasted only 2 years. In 1974, the House of Lords overturned the ruling. The trust fund was taxed down to nothing. Hayley lost roughly £2 million, nearly 17 million USD today, not because she spent recklessly, not because of her own poor management, but because a tax system effectively swallowed the money she earned as a child on film sets, compounded by financial mistakes made by the very people she trusted most. About that pain, Hayley said only one short sentence. "The government stole my trust like pirates." What hurt her wasn't the money. It was the freedom she should have had, the freedom she had been promised. Her son, Crispian Mills, once said that a person cannot mourn something they never truly possessed. And that thought stayed with Hayley for years. The case ended like an invisible wound carved into her youth. Bloodless, but leaving behind a lesson so costly that no one would ever want to endure it. As if losing her entire childhood fortune weren't enough, fate took from Hayley something else. Something spiritually priceless that she cherished just as deeply. Her Juvenile Oscar, the rare honorary award the Academy once gave to outstanding young performers. In 1961, Hayley was honored for Pollyanna. She couldn't attend the ceremony. She was at boarding school, and her parents wanted to keep her life as normal as possible. That small Oscar statuette, accepted on her behalf by Annette Funicello, was later shipped to England and placed proudly in the Mills household. It wasn't just a trophy. It was the symbol of a time when America saw her as Disney's little miracle. But then, in the 1980s, while she was in the U.S. filming Good Morning, Miss Bliss, Hayley returned home to England and discovered that the Oscar had vanished. No forced entry, no broken locks, no drawers rummaged through. It had simply disappeared from the house she believed was safe. Hayley said she searched every room, questioned everyone who had ever visited, and called every place she could think of. But the statuette never resurfaced, and that loss became another kind of wound altogether. No one had stolen her childhood, but someone had stolen the most beautiful symbol of it. The cruel part was this: the Juvenile Oscar was a special custom-made version. After Hayley received hers, the Academy discontinued the award. The mold was destroyed. No identical statue would ever be created again. Hayley often said she didn't miss the piece of metal. She missed the meaning attached to it. Losing the Oscar didn't make her poorer, but it made her feel as if a piece of the little Pollyanna she once was had been taken and hidden away forever. It wasn't until 2022, more than 60 years after she was honored, that the Academy finally presented her with a replacement statuette, brought personally by the Academy's president. Hayley smiled, but her eyes carried the quiet relief of someone reclaiming something lost for far too long. Not because of its value, but because Hollywood had finally stitched back a piece of her childhood that fate had once torn away. Parallel to the financial upheaval and the chaos of her youth, Hayley was also fighting a silent enemy no one in her family or in Hollywood knew about. Bulimia entered her life not through the typical showbiz pressure to stay thin, but from something that sounded harmless at first. A foolish piece of advice from a famous jockey. He told Hayley that jockeys often eat grass to make themselves vomit in order to stay light. Hayley, still just a young girl, constantly told to maintain a perfect image in front of the camera. Grew curious. She tried it. And then it became a trap. No one knew. Not her friends, not her family, not even Walt Disney. Hayley hid it so well that even the people living with her every day couldn't detect a thing. What began as a seemingly harmless experiment quickly turned into an addiction. Her body shrank until she looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin. Her menstrual cycle stopped. Her face became inflamed, covered in painful acne, and she had to take antibiotics for years just to maintain the appearance the film industry demanded. The most frightening part? In the late 1960s, no one knew the word bulimia. Not doctors, not specialists, not any treatment system. For Hayley, the only thought was, I'm doing what I need to do so I can keep acting. No one saw the despair behind the smile of Disney's Golden Girl. It was only much later, when her body began reacting violently, and when motherhood forced her to confront herself, that Hayley slowly pulled herself out of the dangerous spiral. And as the film industry gradually began discussing mental health, eating disorders, and the damage inflicted on child stars, Hayley finally understood that she had been suffering from an actual illness, not a bad habit. She hopes her story can serve as a reminder to young people growing up under the lights and the pressures of social media, that even the brightest faces on screen may be fighting invisible battles, and you do not have to fight alone. That awareness allowed Hayley to become a living witness to the wounds hidden beneath fame, and a voice that helped change the way the world sees its stars. It can be said that Hayley Mills' legacy does not begin with golden statues, nor does it lie in Disney-era box office records. It begins with the way she became a mirror to an era when Hollywood had no idea how to protect its children. In the 1960s, Hayley embodied innocence, the clear, bright glow that Walt Disney used to define family films for an entire generation. Pollyanna, the parent trap in search of the castaways. These films didn't just create a child star, they created a cultural standard, optimism, kindness, and faith in goodness, even when the real world was far more complicated. But it is her private journey, carved with wounds, that makes Hayley Mills a symbol far more enduring than any role she ever played. She was among the first voices to speak about financial protection for child actors, after losing every penny of her childhood earnings to an outdated tax system and blindly trusted financial management. Her revelations in Forever Young compelled both British and American media to re-examine financial regulations for minors in entertainment, paving the way for future protection laws. Hayley also became a prominent voice for mental health in the acting world, bravely revealing her struggle with bulimia at a time when the issue was taboo across Britain. Her admission, "Back then I didn't even know the word bulimia existed," helped thousands of young women confront their own battles. To filmmakers, Hayley is remembered as a model of professionalism. Punctual, humble, never bringing ego onto a set, always thanking every crew member. Details colleagues still recount fondly years later, rare warmth in a demanding industry. To audiences, she is a piece of their childhood. A laugh, a pair of clear eyes, a spirit that refused to break. Reminders that sometimes light comes from the most fragile places. And to young artists, she is a gentle reminder. Early fame is not a curse, if you learn to protect your heart from the world's noise. Wherever she stood, in Disney films, on the theater stage, or in her later life appearances, Hayley Mills left one consistent message. Kindness and endurance can travel farther than any spotlight. Her true legacy is not the roles she played, but the soft, steady strength she left behind in her viewers, those who grew up with her, and the generations who still see themselves in the glow she carried. At nearly 80, Hayley Mills hasn't left the arts. She has simply chosen to move through them more slowly. After her Disney era, she continued her career with steady determination. Films, television, West End theater, independent projects, and even guest roles that introduced her to younger audiences in the age of streaming. In recent years, Hayley has remained active. She appeared in the series Pitching In, 2019, took part in new projects like Arthur's Whiskey, and occasionally returned to the stage. Sometimes even performing alongside her sister Juliette Mills, rekindling the artistic spirit of the family that raised her. Since the release of her memoir Forever Young, 2021, Hayley has become one of the most outspoken advocates for the mental health of child actors. She revisits the stories of bulimia, financial crisis, her stolen Oscar, and her battle with cancer, not to evoke sympathy but to warn the world about the cost of the spotlight. Outside of her craft, Hayley's life revolves around her family. She spends most of her time with her 2 sons, 5 grandchildren, and the partner who stood by her throughout her cancer treatment. Though she is no longer everywhere as she once was, Hayley Mills remains a familiar presence at Disney commemorative events, in interviews about film history, and in the hearts of audiences, as a symbol of resilience, of childhood innocence, and of an artist who never lost herself. If you look only at Pollyanna or The Parent Trap, you will remember the bright smile and the optimistic eyes. But behind those images lies a life full of trials, losing the equivalent of 17 million USD before she ever saw it, battling bulimia throughout her youth without anyone knowing, enduring a controversial marriage, having her Oscar stolen, and later facing cancer in middle age. And yet Hayley Mills did not walk through these storms with bitterness. She chose to move forward, slowly, clearly, without romanticizing the past. Everything that once hurt her has now become something that helps her understand herself and empathize more deeply with others. Today, Hayley lives quietly, but not insignificantly. She is proof that a life once swept into the machinery of fame can still find balance, if one dares to face their wounds and let time heal them. In Hayley Mills's long journey of light and shadow, what stays with you most? Is it Pollyanna's smile, the mischievous sparkle of The Parent Trap, or the strength of a woman who endured loss, illness, and still held on to her optimism? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to join us in exploring more stories behind Hollywood's glamour, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next emotional video.